Welcome this morning to our Highlights Foundation Gather. We are grateful to have Sarah Aronson and Debbi Michiko Florence gather with us today. Please keep the chat going, and if you have questions for Sarah or Debbi, post them in the Q&A section so that after their conversation, we can get to as many questions as possible. We have two people in the chat today who embody the Highlights Foundation's mission to amplify the voices of storytellers. They both support our mission, yes, but that is to say they are both champions and advocates for youth literature, for the people who create it, and for the young people who consume it. Sarah, as you know, is our weekly host here at Gather. She writes everything from picture books through adult and teaches an array of programs for both seasoned and aspiring writers. We are grateful for her many, many talents. Thanks for being here again, Sarah. Debbi Michiko Florence is the author of many books for young people. Her series like Jasmine Taguchi and My Furry Family are beloved to new to reading readers. And her latest middle grade novel, as George shared, Keep It Together, Kiko Carter, should be on every reader's shelf. Let's take a moment to savor the deliciousness of an opening line like, "Some people think that all chocolate is the same, but they're wrong." And so begins our walk with seventh grader Kiko Carter, navigating friendships, first loves, or at least first crushes, and following your heart. I'll post a link so that you can find your way to a signed copy of this special book. Debbi, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for all you do for our children's literature community. Enough with the introductions.
Thank you very
Let's
much.
get to this wonderful conversation. We're so happy to have Debbi and Sarah here together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, George. This has been such a wonderful series for me. If this is your first time at an HF Gather, we meet once a week to talk about those three C's: community, creativity, and curiosity. And today, also craft and characters and chocolate. So we are going to have a great, great time. Debbi, if you would close your eyes for a second. I'm going to show everyone the words.
Close my eyes? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Otherwise, you'll see it. All right. There it is. I know I'm going to say it, so I know it'll be said. Debbi, it's fine. The coast is clear.
I can look? Okay, I'm going to also open my door. Ooh, I need some air.
Coast is clear. Today, let's start, Debbi, by, I would love to know, in this time of stay at home, I know that you have been on deadline. So how have you kept that flame going? What has been working for you? And have you discovered anything new about creativity that is working for you at this time?
Oh, good question. Well, my deadline was today, but I got it done yesterday so that I can be relaxed as we chatted today. I am grateful for the deadline because I think without it, I might be struggling. I know a lot of my writer friends are having a hard time focusing and sitting down to write. And if not for this deadline, I might have fallen into that same category. So I am very deadline focused. If I have a deadline, I am laser focused on making my deadline. So I was treating every day as a work day, as if we were not sheltering in place, and getting to work and making goals for myself and trying to reach them. I did struggle with a lot of up and downs. You know, there were mornings that I just felt so heavy and blue because of the uncertainty, but because again of the deadline, I had to push myself through it. So I've learned that I can write through hard times.
I think that is so empowering that to realize, and I have felt the same way, although I have not been on deadline. And that's actually been working for me, to be trying things that nobody is waiting for. It's been
Nice.
sort of a chance to play without having to worry about if it's good or if it's not good.
Right, that's great.
So I think that one of the things we're all realizing is that how different we all are, and that we can cope during times where not everything is put in place.
Right.
So let's start with that first line, which I also loved. Let's read it again. Actually, I want to read the first couple of lines. Some people think that all chocolate is the same, but they're wrong. Chocolate can be buttery or bittersweet, crumbly or creamy. Some chocolates have undertones of cherry or chocolate or coffee or vanilla. My friendship with my best friends was like the best high quality chocolate, sweet and smooth. Or at least it had been. Right now, I wasn't sure, and I just wanted things to go back to normal. I love that setup. Fabulous.
Thank you.
Tell me, when in the process did you find that beginning?
Very late in the process, actually. I had a very long journey with this particular manuscript. I wrote the first draft in 2006 while I was living in China. And after I finished writing it and revising it, I did submit it out, and it did not find a home, so I put it away for, I'm gonna say, about 5, 6, 7 years. And then in 2015, my writing group, Joe Knowles and Cindy Fonan, both suggested I take that story back out. And I did not look at it again. I knew the story. And so I wrote a new first draft. And it wasn't until late in revision that I came out with that opening. And I feel bad, but I cannot remember who it was that said to me that I should have a stronger opening. And I thought about it, and by then I knew the theme of the story and what was happening. And then I knew it had to be something that had to do with chocolate. And that line came to me, and then I kind of played, the first line came to me, and then I kind of played with that paragraph. So very late in the process, this particular opening came to me.
What's obvious to me is that from the very first line, your character has a voice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means so much to me, coming from you especially.
And the tone of that voice pulls the reader in. So again, we're in the journey of creating the book. Did the tone shift, or were there elements that you always knew would be there from the very beginning? What were the glimmers, as Jennifer?
As what? I'm sorry.
What were the glimmers?
So interestingly enough, when I wrote the book in 2006, it was YA. I envisioned it as a YA story. Keiko and her friends were 16 years old. And when I started submitting it out, most of the rejections stated that this was not a YA voice, that my voice was much younger, and that this sounded like a middle grade voice. And at the time I resisted, because I'm like, but this isn't a middle grade story. It's about kissing and boys and making out. There was making out in the original version. It was obviously, I thought I was writing a YA, so the content was different. So when I took it out in 2015 and reread it, I finally accepted that my voice was younger, particularly for the story. And I had to change a lot of things. A lot of the content changed, but again, the voice stayed the same. So the way the girls talked, and Keiko especially, her personality and her thoughts and everything she was going through, that didn't change. It was the content that changed, and some of the plot. I mean, the main plot stayed. So the glimmers were always there. The chocolate was always there. The challenges of the the friends changing and not getting along was there. The boys, now it's, you know, more of a crush, not like boyfriends as it was when they were 16. But the premise stayed the same, the voice stayed the same, and it was the content that changed. A lot of the content that changed because I was writing now for a middle grade audience.
I think that really speaks to one of the hardest parts of writing a book is holding on to the things you love about your book while accepting
Yes.
change and making revisions and reimagining plots. That, like, whether they kiss or make out, that isn't really a big thing to let go of when you think about the heart versus the heart of the character and what you wanted to say about friendship.
Right.
So let's talk about friendship, because that is such a great part of this book. And like George's daughter, I could not put it down either.
Thank you.
How do you start crafting? Let's look at it from both sides, from the main character's side as well as from the friend's side. Were there exercises that you did, or specific, writing or imagining exercises that you did to help you get to know all those characters, even the ones that are not the point of view character?
Yeah, so one of the things I like to do is interview my characters and keep a diary for the major players. So I am a pantser. So when I sit down, I have a premise and some characters, and I write a very long, I call it my long outline, which is a first draft. And it's not until after I have that very long, general, rambly story, then I go back and I get to know my characters. And during this time, I do interviews. I ask my characters questions from the minutia of what's your favorite color, what's your favorite food, all the way down to like, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? What are you afraid of? What makes you happy? And I do that for like the main characters, and like any major secondary characters. So in this case, it would have been Jenna, Audrey, and Connor, and a little bit of Gregor too. It wasn't until I revised, like when I was starting all over in 2015, and I'd taken a lot of workshops and studied craft more, that I did a little bit more of what you were saying. And so I actually brought out my notebook from when I started revising again or rewriting from 2015, and I was looking at some of the exercises. And one of them came from Kathy Appel. Oh no, now I'm not gonna be able to find it. It was, here it is, controlling belief. So I know, Sarah, you're familiar with this. I think this might have been at a workshop that you and I were at it together. But what is the character's controlling belief? And I figured out, it took me forever, I figured out that perfection equals happiness. That's what Keiko believes, that if everything's perfect, then everybody will be happy. And it wasn't until then that I really started fleshing out what her true journey was of trying to keep everybody happy, trying to make sure that nobody's fighting, that there's no conflict. So that didn't happen until very late in the process, in 2015 when I started rewriting it. So I do a lot of exercises to get to know, and I've got my dog. Hi, doggy. So, yeah, so basically, what?
I want to say, yeah, I'm glad that we mentioned Kathy Appelt. Her lecture called Characters Matter, if ever you can hear her give it, is one of my favorite lectures to listen to. And I've heard her give it, I think, 4 times. I love it so much. The controlling beliefs, that is such an important part. Is what does your character, like, what are your character's inner rules and what do they stand by? And then, since I've heard Kathy talk about this so many times, it's interesting then to pair that with Story Genius, where then she talks about misbeliefs, which is not just controlling beliefs, but then how you misinterpret those yourself within those controlling
Yes.
beliefs. And I think that's where we get tension and internal conflict, is that combination of those two ideas. So ode to
Exactly,
Kathy, yeah, she's
Yes.
amazing. And I agree with you. I also love that you make the long outline. I call that a discovery draft. I delete mine.
Yes.
It's, just.
Wow. So brave.
Yeah, well, it's all about finding your character. I don't think of it as the real writing. And it's actually a gleeful moment when I press goodbye, because I don't have to save anything. I don't know. It works for me. So do you ever write the story in a different point of view, or even a chapter in a different point of view, so that you can see how the other characters are feeling?
Not necessarily a chapter, but I do journal so as in between my discovery draft and actually starting to write the actual manuscript, after I interview all the characters, I'll do a journal. So I will journal from my main character's point of view, just maybe Monday through Sunday, what's going on during the week, not necessarily from a part of the story, just her life. And then I'll do the same thing for any of the other major players. So I kind of get a feel for who they are, what their voice is like, how they're saying similar or different, and what kind of things they want as well. Because every character, I don't know who said it. I'm really bad at remembering, especially these days in shelter in place. I can't even remember, what I'm doing right now. But and now it just escaped my head. What was I going to say? I have no idea. I'm sorry. I took that little segue.
Well,
we were talking about character.
When I think about secondary characters, I think a lot about connectivity and who is making tension when. Linda Sue Park the other day talked about how each scene there has to be some progress and some impediment, especially in middle grade, and that with middle grade there's more progress than impediment in different places. You have to keep that hope alive. With YA, maybe there's a little less hope, and maybe that's what those editors were seeing in your voice, was a little too much hope for YA.
Too hopeful.
Get rid of that hope. But what I like to think, so I really think about who is the co-star of each scene, and how are they creating the most tension, and what creates that tension is what they want in that moment. And so knowing your characters, either through interviewing or diaries or journaling, everyone should be journaling, even if all you journal are squares, that you should get that pencil to the paper, especially at this time. If I can get prescriptive, that would be the one thing I would hope for all writers. So lately I've been reading a book called Your Blue Flame, which is really about finding what you were meant to do. And it feels like you have just fallen into a path of creating characters and stories and series that just feel so natural. I know this wasn't an overnight discovery. Let's go to Jasmine a little. How did Jasmine Taguchi come to be?
Oh my goodness, same thing. Long journeys for me. So Jasmine Taguchi, I actually, just in case people are not familiar, it's a series. There's 4 books, but the first book was Jasmine Taguchi, Mochi Queen. And this was during a time I was still writing YA and really wanting to get a novel, a YA or middle grade novel published. I read a newspaper article about a Japanese American family that got together and made mochi, a Japanese sticky treat, traditionally. And I knew there was a man's job pounding the mochi and a woman's job, traditionally, a woman's job rolling the mochi. And I read this and I briefly thought, what if there was a little girl who wanted to do the boy's job in this traditional family? I wonder what that would look like. And then I tried to shove that idea away because I knew it wasn't a YA story, and I knew it wasn't probably even a middle grade story. And I was writing middle grade and YA, so I kept trying to push that story away. But Jasmine, if any of you have read the book, she's very forthright, and she's very confident, and she wants her voice heard, and she would not shut up, literally just in my head all the time, tell my story. And so I sat down, and I knew it had to either be a picture book or a chapter book. And the idea of writing a picture book terrified me. I highly admire picture book authors. It's a whole different animal than writing a novel. And I thought, boy, that will be a very long learning curve for me. So then I thought chapter book, which I was not familiar with, but thought that's a little bit more like what I've been doing, like a novel, a longer story with chapters. So I sat down and studied a lot of chapter books. I read at least 50, if not more, and then started picking out the ones that I really liked. And then I studied those and chapter by chapter. And then finally I sat down to write Jasmine Taguchi Mochi Queen. And that was in 2010. I revised it. I started submitting in 2012 and got a ton of rejections, including ones that said, these will not appeal to our broad audience. We know what that meant.
We do.
Yes. So I put the story away. Just like with Keiko, I put it away because I didn't want to write Jasmine Smith, Cupcake Queen. I wanted to write this story, and it wasn't a story about Japanese culture. There was Japanese culture in it, but it was really about a little girl who wanted to do something before her bossy big sister, because her sister was always the expert, which is why she decided she wanted to pound mochi in her family. I put the story away, and then We Need Diverse Books came about in 2014 and started getting the word out of the importance of having books from many different backgrounds. A librarian friend of mine, Jennifer Groff, told me I should bring that story back out. I did, but I was not confident that anything had changed. I didn't even look at it. I took it exactly the way it was, and I submitted it out because I wanted to prove to my friend that this is not going to sell. And as you know, I was actually dropping a friend off, Christy Boyce, who made this for me. I was dropping a friend off at the airport, and I looked at my email, and I had an offer. So a long journey, but yes. And then in that offer came, we love this book so much, we want it to be a series. Will you write 3 more books? And I did. So.
We Need Diverse Books has made such a huge impact on our community.
Yes.
In so many great ways that as a Jewish writer, I feel more empowered to write Jewish stories that aren't just about bar mitzvah or
Yes.
the Holocaust.
Yes.
I get to read about people who I would never have read about before. And I think that as much as we are all apart, that's bringing us together.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. There's so many stories to be told out there from many points of view, kind of like the Keiko Carter story. You know, there's a little bit of microaggressions involved. She's half Japanese American, half white. She's Hafu. And while that plays a huge part of who she is and how she reacts to things and how she interacts with her family, that's not what the story is about. The story is about changing friendships and first crushes. She just happens to be Hafu. So yeah.
Yep, it's so powerful. It's great. It's the example of show don't tell.
Definitely.
So I'm sure that there are some people out there who are thinking that they live in a diverse world, and they would like to include diverse characters in their stories, not as main characters, but as secondary characters. And do you have any advice for those people?
I do, and I don't. So first off, yes, I agree. You want a diverse cast of characters because that's the real world. I tend to like when I'm reading a book and there's a Japanese American character, either as a secondary character or a side character written from by an author who is not Japanese American. I most appreciate it when the character is just the character and it's not really brought to their attention. Joe Knowles's book, Where the Heart Is, comes to mind. The Micah is Japanese American. So if I may just little segue here, because Joe and I have been friends for a very long time. I don't know if she's here, but I said, oh my goodness, when I read the draft, there's a Japanese American best friend. And she says, yes, because one of my best friends is Japanese American. I said, oh, and I was thinking, I wonder who that is. She's like, Debbie. I was like, oh. But I felt she handled it so well because we know he's Japanese American from his last name, but never really is it like, oh, he eats sushi, or, you know, he made a comment in Japanese or whatever. It was just so nice to see that representation there without me feeling like, oh, we're falling into a stereotype. I've read other stories that, you know, that Japanese American character only eats sushi. And it's like, well, that's, you know, that's falling into a stereotype. So if you're going to write a character, a secondary character, a minor character from a different background, to try not to fall into stereotypes. This has been announced. So there's a follow-up book coming up, Just Be Cool, Jenna Sakai, a follow-up to Keiko Carter, and Jenna Sakai is one of her best friends, and the next book will be told from her point of view. And I have a character who is a secondary, not quite secondary, but a character who has a part in the book who's Black. And I have asked for an expert reader for my publisher, and they're getting me one. Because I want to make sure that I have created this character respectfully, that I have not fallen into any of my biases, because we all have biases. So I'm relieved for that, because I want to make sure that I have created this character respectfully. So those are my two advice. That you can create these characters and not hone in on the fact that they are of a different race and they're there. And if this character has a bigger part, to perhaps get an expert reader to make sure you're not falling into stereotypes.
Right. I mean, what always makes me smile is that you should never fall into stereotypes.
Right.
No matter what. Like, your character should not be two-dimensional, no matter what.
Yes, what you
So,
said.
right. So, like, we don't want to take the opportunity to add culture and diversity to our cast of characters and then say, well, because they're diverse, we don't have to do that extra work. We've always had to do that extra work. And that's what makes really a great read, is when you believe that the characters are real. That's what we're going to be talking about in Get to Know Your Character. We're going to try to make all the characters real. Because that's the foundation, is that when you really know your characters, you know what they're going to say, you know what they're going to do, you know what, like, you know if they're funny or if they're sad. You guess less, write more.
Yes.
Oh, I like that. Guess less, write more.
Guess less, write more. And on that same topic, when you're getting feedback, either editorial letter or critiques from your critique group, and if somebody makes a suggestion about, oh, perhaps the character can do this, if you know your character, you will know not exactly that, but this. And not that you're not going to take advice, but you will know deep down inside how your character will react. So addressing whatever the problem is in the way that your character would actually react.
That's right. I know, this is the moment where I want to do a little bragging, because you were at our whole novel retreat. And can you just brag a little bit about highlights and how awesome it is?
Yes. Thank you for asking that, because I definitely wanted to talk about that. Because George mentioned the whole novel retreat that you're doing online. I run around to people all the time and recommend the whole novel revision retreat. I wholly believe that I would not have gotten sold Keiko Carter as quickly after revising as I did without the whole novel retreat. I had this full manuscript that I'd revised 1 billion times. I couldn't see clearly anymore. My writing group has seen it by that time 1 billion times, and it's hard to to see things clearly after you've read something so many times. And I knew I needed a fresh set of eyes, but I didn't want to just ask anybody. So I signed up for the Highlights Whole Novel Retreat because of the excellent mentors, Sarah, of course. And it was just an amazing experience. First off, you have a mentor. I had Jennifer Jacobson, who reads your entire manuscript. You get an editorial letter, just like you would from an editor, and you have time to process it before you get to the retreat, which I thought was brilliant, because you're not sitting there and going, you have time to process, because you're all, for me, my initial reaction is usually, no, you don't understand what I'm trying to do. And they don't, because if they have comments, they don't understand what you're trying to do. Or the second is, I have so much to do, I'm never going to be able to do it all. So you have this time to process, and you get to the retreat, you get to meet with your mentor and talk about revisions. You get to meet with, you have workshops given by all the fabulous teachers, and you do exercises, and you have this, I can't remember what it's called. What was the thing that we do with Nicole? And
the brain trust.
The brain trust. That, I will have to say, I was resistant to. I came in and thought, we're going to be sitting around with these people who I don't know, who haven't read my work. How can they possibly help me? And I was very resistant to it, but it turned out to be this amazing thing that's run by the writer, asking questions. And I received some amazing feedback that really helped me. So again, if I may just say, whole novel writing revision retreat at Highlights changed my life, changed the way I write. When I have another full manuscript that I'm revising, that I'm stuck on, and it falls right at the time for the whole novel revision retreat, I will be back. That's how much I believe in it. I will be back.
Thank you. I want to take it now too. I love the whole novel retreat. I love being part of it. I will say that if anybody ever wonders about this, the day the mentors, I use the word mentor, I don't like that word. The day the facilitator or your fellow, the person you're in fellowship with, your partner, presses send on that letter is the most stressful day, because what we want to do is open doors for the writer. And that is our only hope. And we want to put everything in play to get the plates spinning. And we want the writer to receive it in that way that it is, the doors are opening, the windows are opening, the possibilities are here, and let you figure that out, not us. It's not a to-do list. I think I've said that in other weeks. It's never a to-do list. And we love it. We love seeing what happens when our writers fly with it. It's really fly.
And if I may say also, I took the whole novel retreat with my dear friend, Christy Boyce, if I may so, and she sold her novel after the one that she took to workshop at the whole novel retreat. She also sold that one. So 2 success stories right there.
I will confess that when I read her application and read what her book was about and the opening, I thought, how is this not already a book? I loved it the minute I saw it. It's just going to be great.
Right, and if I may plug it, Hot British Boyfriend, which will come out from HarperCollins next year.
It's great. Put it on your list. All right, lightning round questions.
Okay.
Pencil, pen, or straight to the keyboard?
Straight to the keyboard.
New York or Chicago style pizza?
Oh, I'm going to have to go with New York.
Yeah, me too. And I'm here in Chicago. Sorry, friends. Thin crust forever. Scrivener or note cards?
Scrivener.
Ah, interesting. I'm a note card gal. Library or coffee shop when you can go?
You mean to work at?
Yeah, to work at.
Probably coffee shops. I need coffee, but I tend not to want to work in public because I learned maybe 7 years ago that I mouth as I'm typing, and I get very self-conscious because I try not to mouth because I'm in public, but then it stifles me. So I like to work when I'm all by myself or with my friends in a room.
Yeah, cannot work at a coffee shop. If I'm at the coffee shop pretending to be writing, I'm just eavesdropping. Usually I'm not writing anything at all. So the most important question, dark chocolate or milk chocolate? Or
Dark chocolate.
Do you know about the Terry's chocolate orange?
The what?
Terry's chocolate orange.
Is that big thing that you crack and
yeah,
opens
whack
up?
it back. Yes.
That's good too, but I'm a dark chocolate fan.
Okay.
I like to break off my
Terry's,
squares. What?
I am a chocolate orange all the way. All right,
That's awesome.
Questions. We have a question from Kate Korchinsky. Hi, Debbie and Sarah. I've just decided to write a novel. The main character that wants to be heard is my 15-year-old self set in 1989. I want it to be fictional, not autobiographical. Have you ever written a character based on yourself? And how do you separate yourself from the character to make it fiction? How do you let go of the details of your own story?
Well, Keiko is started off based very much on me. And surprise, I'm a people pleaser and Keiko's a people pleaser. And I did have a similar situation with my friends and a boy and triangles and liking the same boy and all that. But yeah, in order to make it not autobiographical, I had to let go of a lot of the story and just take the gist of it, of what happened. So if you don't want to write a nonfiction / autobiography, I say take the heart of what happened and everything else is fiction. That character is no longer you, and to step away from what really happened.
Yeah, I'm going to quote Laura Ruby and say, I am everyone in my books and I am no one. I think that our memories are a big part of what motivates us to write. Many of us felt outside the main group. We felt like the other for whatever reason, and we were observers. And we have some sort of unfinished business. And I think that's what the journal is for, is to use your journal to flesh out those emotions. And then remember, a novel takes how many years? I think Beyond Lucky took me 7 years to write and 37 drafts. Be kind to yourself. Make the mistakes, write the autobiography, and then start from there. Words on the page are easier to play with than words that are just ideas in your head.
Oh, that's a good point.
Charles Richardson asks about breaking out with a chapter book versus middle grade.
So the funny thing is, I really, really wanted to write middle grade novels, and that was my sole focus and goal. But when I wrote Jasmine Taguchi, that was what sold first. And I did the thing that you're not supposed to do. So I sent out Mochi Queen directly to editors. And because I thought I'm only going to write one chapter book, this one Mochi Queen, and I'm not going to write ever another chapter book. So I don't want to get an agent on this. And in the meantime, I was submitting my YA / middle grade manuscripts to an agent at the exact same time. And so as luck would have it, I got an offer for Mochi Queen at the same time that I was getting interest on my novels from an agent. And then I had to confess to both of them that, oops, well, I got an offer from an editor on this thing you haven't seen, and I'm in the process of trying to find an agent. So as for breaking in, I think you write the story that you want to write, that you're most passionate about, and that's the story that's going to carry you through. Because all honesty, if you're thinking, what's going to make a sale, this thing that I don't really care about, but this is what's hot, you're going to be living with that book over and over again, not only while you're revising, but when you're doing revision for your editor and copy editing and proofing and promoting. So write the book of your heart. And I think that's the most important advice I could give.
Yeah. It is, when I first started writing the wish list series, was not thinking about a series. I wasn't even thinking that I was going to write a book to submit. I was thinking I was writing a story that was going to make me laugh.
Oh,
I called it my peach sorbet because I was writing something really intense during the day. And that story became, I mean, I think Isabel, that's a story about a bossy older sister too. I wouldn't know anything
Yes.
about bossy older sister. Hi, Miriam. Hi, Annie. That it's finding what you want to say and saying it, and being like reckless and bold enough to just say it the way it needs to come out.
Yep.
I have three more questions I definitely want to take. One is from KT Horning. Other than kissing, what else had to go from to make it a middle grade from a YA? And I would say almost tween.
So a lot of the making out, there wasn't any sex, but there was reference to sex. So that obviously had to go. The cursing went. There was cursing. And so that all had to go. Originally, when I started writing this story, it was more about body image. It started off with body image because I remember how everybody around me was developing and I was not. I'm still waiting, but it was like very much Keiko was obsessed, almost obsessed with breasts and getting breasts and bras. In fact, the original title of the story was Bras and Chocolate. And that might have worked for a YA, but as I was revising it and making it more of a tween novel, I still was using the Bras and Chocolate title. My friend's daughter, who was a tween at the time, was horrified and said she would never pick up a book with the word bra on it. Yeah. And that's when I knew I had to drop that too. So a lot of things had to go. The talk about the sex, and the funny thing is the whole breast body image thing didn't necessarily go away because I was dropping it down to tween, because I think that's the age that really you obsess about things. And there is some of it in this book, but the focus for me changed when I focused more on who Keiko was and what her journey was, and it was less about body image, and it was more about being a people pleaser.
You see in that very first paragraph that she's worried about her friends. Yeah. And that is, like from the beginning to the end, that it's what she's worried about and what she wants is always right there. Right. It's great. Kathy asks for a little bit of input about how you're using the journal. Anything specific? I can answer that question as well. So is there anything when you are journaling in your character's point of view?
Okay.
Is there any guidelines, anything specific?
No, I try and start with just whoever age she is, she's 12, however a 12-year-old might come home from school and journal what happened that day. And that's how I would get a good idea what each character was focused on, friendship or soccer or whatever it was. Because that's what you journal about. That's what I journal about. Most of my journaling is about my writing. So that's how you figure out who your character is, by letting them just free flow, letting go and just writing whatever without guiding it.
Yeah,
how about you, Sarah?
I do similar. I keep a journal from the character's point of view. Sometimes she doesn't want to be forthcoming. Sometimes she does. But always in the point of view so that I can start to find the voice. And the concerns and the obsessions. And I have a bunch of my old journals, and they don't have to be content heavy. They just have to be heart heavy. What's on my character's mind? I want to know that. With the novel I'm working on right now, it's really obvious what she's worried about. And then it becomes my job to integrate that into a story. And to see where that leads my story, that problem, those misconceptions, those misbeliefs. All right, let's talk very quickly about how do you discover the story tangents or subplots that enrich the main plot without letting them take over?
Sorry, I'm laughing because I'm just thinking about the book I just turned in to my editor, the Jenna Sakai book. When I first started writing that, I had this side character, an adult side character, And I wrote 4 chapters about this character who's an adult who doesn't even take, it's not even important to the story, and I had to start all over. So sometimes those subplots will take over, and if it's a child, a tween or whatever, that person might be able to carry another novel, but this, obviously this adult, she was just quirky and I liked her. So I had to pull way back. How those subplots, you know, here's the thing for me about plotting. Some people, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and plotting comes fairly easy to me. And it just happens. I write, and that's why I write that long, what did you call it? A discovery draft? Yeah. My long discovery draft, because that's my plotting draft. I'm trying to figure out what happens and what happens next and how to end a chapter. And so you want to keep turning the pages. So I don't know how my subplots happen. They just kind of, they show up. They show up and I run with it. I will admit this, I have too many subplots in my early drafts. I've got like 1 billion subplots and I have to pull way back. In fact, sometimes when I get to the editor, like the editors bought my book, they're the ones who are telling me, you have a lot of things going on here. So let's cut some threads there. So for me, I do have a hard time pulling back on the subplots. And yeah, so yeah, I start with
I will add that about 5 weeks ago, I got a letter from my agent telling me about how many doodads I had in my novel, and that the ones she wanted me to get rid of were the ones that were too authorial, and that they were my brain and my ego wanting to put in these things that are important to me and that were not coming from my character. And let's just say, everyone, I'm going to confess it here. It was not easy for me to give those up. And I had to lose 20,000 words of Judy. But now I have a draft, and I'm getting there. It's not even close to ready yet, of a story about the girl who I wanted to write about from the beginning. And I think of that part of the journey, that exploration, those side routes, as that's just what I needed to do for this book. Yeah. I wish I had been faster. I would like to have a novel under contract, but that novel had to come this way. And so I accept the process and continue to push forward.
Yep.
I think if we can have a chance for one last question. You work in a group of amazing writers. Let's just talk about how we can support each other. How are all the ways you feel supported by other writers?
Oh,
and
my
how we can celebrate each other's success without feeling that pang of without comparing ourselves to each other.
Well, yeah, the whole comparison thing. So a long time ago, when I first started out in the early 2000s, I went to a Poconos SCBWI retreat with Lori Hulse Anderson and her writers group. And she had just, Speak had just come out and was getting a lot of attention. And so they were in a panel and somebody asked them, is there any jealousy coming out of the group? Because you're all one group and you're at different levels. And I will never forget, I wish I could remember who said it, but I will never forget the person saying, when you're jealous of somebody, you have to take, and you want what they have, you have to consider everything. You can't have just the good thing. You don't know what else they're going through. They might be going through a divorce or, an ailing parent or whatever. So just because somebody's having something really good happen to them doesn't mean that everything's perfect. And I've always kept that in me, because it is hard. You compare all the time. It's just natural. Having a strong community and support group is hugely important. I had a writers group in New York when I lived in upstate New York. I saw Nancy Castaldo pop up. She and I and a group of other people were in a writers group together, and we got together and critiqued. But for me, the most important thing was the support we got from one another. Keep going. I believe in you. Don't give up. Oh, that editor doesn't know what they're talking about. Why'd they reject you? That kind of thing. And Jennifer Groff was also in that group, and she was the one who got me to resubmit Jasmine Taguchi. And then I also met Joe Knowles and Cindy Fawnin. We met originally, do you all remember LiveJournal? So there's this huge writing community online on LiveJournal, and we all became friends that way. Sarah, I'm pretty sure that's how I met you. And we supported one another. We spoke to one another. We shared what we were doing. And then Cindy and Joe became a writers group with me 15 years ago, just about the time I was moving to China and having to leave everything behind. And one of the things they did for me, which I'm going to try not to get choked up, because I will get choked up if I think about it too much. But I went to China and had to leave everything behind, and went because my husband had a job there. And we started meeting on Skype together to work together. So I wasn't alone. And not only that, but they changed the writing time. So we have 12-hour writing difference. So for me to write in the morning, they had to start writing at night, which wasn't their natural time. And so we'd all meet. We'd sit on Skype together and we'd go write for 15-minute increments. Go, and we'd write. And then in 15 minutes, we'd check in. We wouldn't chat. We'd say, I got 200 words done, or I goofed off, or I revised a page. And to this day, we still check in. That was 15 years ago. We've kept it up. And to this day, we still check in with one another during the day and talk about how, what goal we've met. I also fully believe in social media and supporting one another and tweeting about one another's books and successes, because somebody else's success is also a success for all of us, because that means children's books are still being published. And I try my hardest to share books that I've read that I love, retweeting people when they have their book birthdays, because that makes us a family. And, we can be a dysfunctional family and sometimes be jealous or upset or whatever. But all in all, I just feel like we support one another and cheer each other on. There was an editor once that said at a retreat, and I don't remember, I'm not going to name names anyway, because it was not something I liked. But the editor said, basically, look around the room. These are your competitors. And I felt like, no, and it broke my heart, because no, we're not competing against one another. I mean, I just feel like that's what we can do for each other is support one another.
Yeah, if people are having problems feeling like a fraud, or feeling like you are feeling jealous, or feeling unworthy of your story, which is a whole other thing. Matali Perkins last 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was, how long ago is it? Suggested your blue flame, and I've been listening to it, and they are actually questions to help you find why you haven't found your blue flame yet. What sparks your creativity? What gets you out of feeling guilty? What makes you realize why somebody else is successful, and help you see how you can also be successful. It's not quite self-help. It's not quite big magic, but it's been really fun to listen to. All of us, none of us do this alone. All of us have a community that we rely on for advice, for support, for laughs. It doesn't mean you only can be a critique group. We need each other to support ourselves emotionally, because this journey is long and it is hard.
Yes.
And with that, I'm going to bring back George and Allison back to our screens, because community is what we are about at Highlights.
Definitely, yes. I love my community, awesome. And I love Highlights.
And I wanted to say, Debbie, you didn't maybe see it because I know you closed the chat, but Pam Courtney is here, and she wanted to give a special hello and a special thank you. Debbie is Pam's mentor, and she said, thank you so much for all your support. So what a great theme.
I just love being able to give back to the community. We were talking about community and everything. I started off with people who supported me, and I love to be able to pay it forward that way. And I just feel blessed that I have brilliant, talented mentees through the Diversity Fellowship here at Highlights.
Well, thank you all. That was so lovely. The day can just be done now. I'm done.
Yes, that was great.
No, now it's time to
I
write.
know.
Yes, now it's time to write.
That sounds
So we
great.
do have a conversation on Friday that Pat Cummins will be leading with
Ooh.
Laurent Lynn and Cecilia Jung. And I think their topic is thinking about Tommy DePaula and Tommy's art. So please sign up for that. Join us Friday. And we will be in touch. We think Sarah's coming back next week for another session. And if
With
not,
Jennifer Jacobson.
oh,
Yay!
we'll be in
She's the
touch.
reason Keiko Carter exists.
And do please check out the Highlights Foundation website. Look at all of our courses. We've just put all of our summer camps online. We have online classes, courses, you name it. We'd love to see you. Thank you,
Yay.
everybody.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. That was so
Bye.
wonderful.
That was fun.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thanks, Debbie.